Welcome to the second iteration of our first generation conversations. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Williams, and I am a first generation student myself. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Communication Studies, and I am joined today by a first generation student and a first generation alumna. And the purpose of today is to allow these two individuals to have a conversation to learn what challenges and what opportunities first generation students have, and how they overcome challenges, what connections may be common between these two individuals, and to just kind of give them the opportunity to network and form a relationship. And those of us who are watching give us the opportunity to also ask questions if any come to mind. So today I'm joined by Stephanie McKay, who is an alumna of our department, and Julie April, and I'm going to let both of them introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what their journey has been like so far. Stephanie, would you like to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie McKay, and I am currently a manager of U.S. Communications at PCL Construction. We're a large general contractor based here in Denver, Colorado. That's where I'm sitting today in my office. I've been at PCL since I graduated CSU 14 years ago. It's hard to believe. I interned at PCL while I was at CSU in their marketing communications department. And since that time, we didn't really have a robust communications department. And so I've created that over the last 14 years here and have a team of 7. Personally, I am a wife and a mother to 3 little children who are 6, 4, and 6 months old. So that's a little bit about me.
Julie?
Hi, I'm Julie April. I graduated this semester with a degree in communication studies and then with a minor in English. Right now, I'm looking for some jobs to apply for, just hanging out for now, figuring out what my next steps are, especially in the interesting job market that we have at the moment. But eventually, I would like to go back and get my master's degree in communication studies. I've looked at CSU's program and looked at the University of Washington's program as well, which a lot of the faculty here came from University of Washington. So I've had a lot of glowing recommendations for both schools. And yeah, I'm just excited to talk to everybody today and kind of get to know some other first generation college students a little bit better.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Julie, I apologize for not introducing you as an alumna. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
So to start our conversation today, Julie, you mentioned the moment that we find ourselves in. So to kick things off, if you both could just reflect on the last 2.5 months and share with our audience what you have seen as communication challenges specifically during this time. And I'm going to go ahead and hide myself now. And after you all have talked about that, then I'll let Julie take over asking questions. So Stephanie, if you want to start by talking about those challenges.
Sure. The last 2.5 months has been probably crazy for many people, including myself. I had returned from maternity leave 2 weeks before kind of the pandemic hit, and on Tuesday, March 17th, I was sitting in my office and was told to immediately leave because we had a few suspected cases of COVID-19 in my office. So I quickly gathered my things and didn't come back until I think May 15th. So being in communications, a large part of what I do is crisis communications, and the pandemic is all about crisis communications. And there is no roadmap for this. There is no handbook, and so every company is trying to figure it out. Every family is trying to figure it out with the best that they can. I would say the first few weeks, months, I sit on our company-wide pandemic committee. We had it was more than daily calls. It was, hourly calls because things were changing so rapidly. working in a construction company. We are an essential business, so we never closed. So I was managing executive communication, social media, the comments we were getting on social media, the media requests that were coming in. I would say it's probably the busiest time in my career. And then also personally had to shift to not only being a mom, but a teacher. So the balance between teacher and worker and mom and wife was incredibly overwhelming. I feel like we're starting to see the light a little bit and return a little bit back to normal. But the challenges were very difficult, both from a communications perspective, difficult both personally and professionally. The construction industry typically is not known for embracing working from remote working arrangements. And so we quickly had to adapt. The first few Zoom and Microsoft Team calls were interesting. I actually took a screenshot because some people couldn't figure out how to change their background. Somebody's camera was flipped and they were upside down. We were cats meowing in the background. So there's definitely some communication. My kids were screaming in the background. So there's definitely some communication challenges moving to a virtual platform. But I think there were some SNL skits about it as well. But I think more people are just getting used to it and kind of getting into a groove. And so for me personally, it's getting better. But we definitely experienced quite a few communication hurdles that we've been able to overcome.
Yeah, I would say from my experience, it was definitely interesting moving all of our classes online. Particularly for a lot of people, they had to learn to use Canvas, had to learn to use Zoom in ways that they had never had to use it before. So there was a lot of a learning curve when it came to moving all of that online. And then I also worked at the Career Center at the time as a career education specialist. So we did drop-ins and we had to figure out how to move our drop-ins to Zoom and how to schedule appointments over Zoom and everything like that. So I think part of it was just like the learning curve, kind of like you were talking about, is that a lot of people all of a sudden had to learn a bunch of new technology really quickly. And then I think the other thing that's been difficult is just continuing to communicate with people relationally. So like there are lots of ways to communicate for your job and you kind of have to, and you have to go to these meetings at these times. But I think something else that's been difficult is just making sure that you're calling friends and calling family and trying to still get human interaction, even though you're stuck at home, I think has been probably the other more difficult aspect of communication, is just learning how to not be super isolated in this time. So then if you're ready, we can move on into those first couple of questions that I have. My first is probably a easy one. It's what aspect of your college experience would you say that you're most proud of?
This may sound cliche, but I was at CSU for 4 years, and it was, when you're looking back, it's like the best time of my life. But I would say the aspect of my college experience that I'm most proud of is honestly the friendships that I made, because those friendships are still the connections that I have today. And, as you mentioned, having those personal connections and with friends, work is kind of a necessity, but, I had a Zoom happy hour with my friends from CSU several times over this pandemic. And so, I graduated and I got a really great education, but the people that I met and the people that I'm still connected to is something that I'm really proud of.
Totally agree. I think, college is such a great way to meet like-minded people as well. And that's huge going into the rest of your life.
Yeah. And it's also a really great opportunity to meet people who are not like you. One of my best friends, I would have never said would be a best friend before college, but we don't have common interests. But we are as close as can be. And so that also opened up. Yes, I had friends with minded interests, but also those who are totally different than me.
Totally. I think that's a great point. Look, Juliet has a question, and it's, have you found a first generation mentor? And how do you maintain a connection with the mentorship during these times? So maybe that's for either of us, but.
I don't know, Julie, if you have something off the top of your head.
I would say emailing professors, particularly in the communications department. There are a lot of people who either were first generation college students or at least have been in a similar boat. So I would say my big thing has been like just keeping the connections with my professors as mentors.
Yep, I think that's great. You know, this sounds kind of crazy, but you know, at my company, it's a construction company, primarily male dominated. So I do seek out those females for mentorship. There are definitely a few here that I reach out to regularly, and it's really, like you said, emailing. I text, I call, I maintain that connection. We also know that there's not a lot of females in the construction industry, so it is very supportive of females, and there is a strong mentorship culture within the industry and specifically at PCL to find those female mentors.
Yeah, I think that's great to have people who have been in similar situations to you in your industry as well. So then my next question is, what resources did you find particularly helpful either during college or during your career?
During college, the resources, definitely the faculty and staff, your advisor. They are a wealth of knowledge and so willing to help. You just have to make the appointment or just walk in. You know, I had different study groups. I think that there are other, like, I didn't join it personally, but I actually asked some of my colleagues who also went to CSU, graduated a little bit more recently than I did, what they did, and they joined, you know, there's Public Relations Society, student group, and so I think those are all really great resources while you're in college. Outside of college, still, I look at PRSA, the International Association of Business Communicators, IABC. There's a lot of organizations out there that there's a wealth of information, especially as you're coming out of school, learning your particular either industry or a little bit more about communication and how it applies to everyday business. There's a ton of organizations out there that I really rely on. You know, I came to PCL with not a communications mentor. I had to build a department, and so I had to go out and seek more information so that I can continue learning, because learning is a never-ending process. You know, Julie, you had mentioned that you're interested in going and getting your master's. I did that. I went to the University of Denver and got my communications degree with an emphasis on public relations. So learning never ends.
What advice would you have for initiating stuff like that, like study groups, going and talking to your professors, finding mentors, just kind of taking that plunge to make sure that you meet people?
You just have to get out there and do it. Growing up, I was incredibly shy and quiet, and I don't like talking to new people. It is difficult for me. You wouldn't know it now, but it was difficult for me to walk into a room and introduce myself. You know, as communicators, that's our job, is to communicate, and so you do have to find ways to get over that. One thing that helped me, obviously, the various speech classes helped me, but after leaving CSU, I joined Toastmasters. So that helped with some public speaking, and Toastmasters is a great resource for public speaking and networking. And, you know, what do you say when you walk up to a group of people who are talking? How do you introduce yourself?
I think I like the direction you took that. I feel like a lot of comm studies students are often in similar positions where they're feeling a little bit shy, or maybe they're feeling like, wow, I'm way too socially awkward, or I'm way too this or that to be a good communication student. And in at least my own life, I feel like I've become such a much more confident communicator than I would have been had I not taken these classes and met the people that I've met through this degree. Which kind of leads into my next question. What advice would you give to current students who are feeling in over their head, or maybe like they don't belong because they're a first generation college student, or because they feel like they don't know what they're doing?
What advice? Find a mentor, whether that's a professor or a faculty member, or, if you do have a job or part-time job, I did in college, is there someone there that you can use as a mentor? Get involved in groups or activities. I think kind of helps your mental state. For me, when I was at CSU, I was part of Greek life. I was in a sorority. Those friendships made me, kind of kept me grounded. So, finding whatever group speaks to you or activity speaks to you. And just, this is the time to try new things. College is, the time to try, anything that might be of interest to you. So I think it's just finding that support network to make sure that and to know you're not alone. Especially during this time, mental health is such an important thing to focus on. And yes, you have to focus on your physical health and make sure you're out exercising, but some people forget that your mental health is just as important. And so you need to find ways to either relax, de-stress, connect with people who are meaningful to you.
Totally. I like that you mentioned community a lot in there, and kind of having a support system. I felt like that was something that was helpful for me too, because particularly coming in, for first generation college student, it's really easy to feel like you don't belong in like higher education, or to feel like you don't know enough to succeed. And I really liked how you brought in like having those mentors who can kind of help you walk through your college experience when you have questions, and having those friends who keep you grounded and making sure that you're focusing on your mental health. I think that's all really great advice, and I would definitely echo it as a recent graduate as well. And my next question is not as heavy of a one, but what is something that you wish you had known while you were navigating college or while you were entering your career?
Something that I guess I wish I had known just coming into the workplace. I did not know anything about like Microsoft Word or Excel or PowerPoint. So I think I took a class on PowerPoint, but some of those platforms, and I'm sure the curriculum has changed in the last 14 years, but some of those just like basic business functions, like I didn't know how to use a print, like how to copy on this massive printer that we had. And so, and I was sitting there fumbling with it, and it's okay to ask somebody. Like, that's not something that you're necessarily going to know coming out of college is how to use the copy machine or what, things like that you don't really think about. And I think that's the biggest lesson is you don't have to know everything, and you can raise your hand and say, hey, can you help me? I think it's unbelievable how many people are willing to help if you just ask. They don't know that you have a question unless you ask it. And I'm a firm believer that there are no dumb questions, like how do you use the copy machine?
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree with that as well. Like asking questions. I don't think I've ever asked a question and then had a professor say, hey, that's a dumb question. I don't think any professor would ever do that. But I think that's really great advice, is that there are some aspects that you don't necessarily learn in school, and it's good to ask those questions when you're first starting to struggle with it instead of just struggling alone. And I think that kind of leads into, I'm really playing it fast and easy with the kind of, my next question, which would be, what advice do you have when it comes to just networking? Because it can be a little difficult for first generation college students who might not have their parents' network to jump into. So what advice would you have for just making sure that they create that network while they're in college?
Number one, you have to have a LinkedIn account. That is the basis of your networking platform. The second thing is through LinkedIn, if you are interested in a particular company or you're interested in a particular position, find those people and that are on LinkedIn and send them a message. Like I said before, it's amazing how much people are willing to help if you just ask. So number one, make sure that you have a LinkedIn, find connections through LinkedIn. It is unbelievable how small the world can be. And so how many connections, you might have a connection who knows somebody that can get you in the door somewhere. And then, like I mentioned earlier, some of those groups, PRSA, IABC, those all have student chapters. They have local chapters. I'm a member of IABC, International Association of Business Communicators here in Colorado. That's a robust group. And though your parents, you might not want to look to your parents for, those networking, but is there a neighbor? You just kind of have to look around. Is it your doctor? Like, there are so many people that you touch on a daily basis that you connect with that. One thing that I learned while I was at CSU, and one of my friends who he actually works at MTV. He left CSU and went to MTV, and he still works there. And he said to me, "You never know what somebody can do for you," and you don't. It's true. You really don't know what somebody can do for you or what connection they can make for you. So that just goes back to be nice to everybody, because someday they might help you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's super helpful, is how to think about different people in your life. And then we already talked a little bit about like how to initiate some of those conversations. I think one question I have, particularly for those of us who have just graduated, in college, you kind of have all of these opportunities just kind of handed to you to like meet other people and to become a part of groups. What advice would you have for getting kind of that social support system as somebody who's out of college and kind of just responsible for all of that on their own?
Yep. So, I graduated from CSU. I finished high school here in Colorado. So I did have that network. I did have those friendships. I had a lot of friends who left and went somewhere that they've never been before. And one of their struggles was like finding friends. That's very difficult when you move to a new city. So, based off of what I remember from what my friends had to do, yes, they joined various groups. There's a ton of business events. There's a lot of alumni associations in different cities. I was in San Francisco shortly after I graduated, and my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, went to CU Boulder, and we walked into a bar, and it was a entire CU Boulder bar. Like, there's those types of places or groups that are in every city. And so I would definitely recommend finding that CSU alumni group in your city, and entering some sort of, business group if that's what you're interested in, finding some intramural sport league if that's what you're into. It's not easy to find friends, but you do have to make the effort. And then the other thing that I noticed here, especially at my company, we do have a lot of people that move around. And so we organize a lot of social events. And so get to know your coworkers, and hopefully your company organizes those sorts of things as well. And you get to know their friends. And, we have a really great social network here at my company for people who don't have anybody else and don't have family here.
Nice. I like you mentioned alumni associations, because that's something that I didn't know existed anywhere. I guess in the back of my head, I was like, the alumni association is on CSU's campus, so that's where all the alumni meet. So I appreciate personally like knowing that that's a thing that I may run across in various cities. So trying to see what question I should ask next. What would you say is like your number one piece of advice? I know I've asked a lot of like, what would your advice be? But like, what's the number one thing that you would want to tell your younger self if you could kind of go back and to like 2005 and tell her something college related, first generation related?
Number one piece of advice. That's a tough one because I have a lot, but I think I've probably already mentioned it, and it goes back to this is not the end of your learning experience. I left college and I'm like, whoo, I'm done. And then I realized I didn't know enough about business communication. I didn't know enough about the industry that I worked for. As a communicator, you have to know your industry to be able to communicate. So I actually went back to CSU through their global program downtown Denver and got my certificate in construction management so that I could communicate about what we do. And then, like as I mentioned, I went back and got my master's. And so learning never ends. And I realized that shortly after I started working that was not the end of reading books. That was not the end of taking tests. That was not the end of just learning in general. I actually realized even more so like how much you have to really focus if you want to succeed in the workplace. And I'm sort of a perfectionist. I really I worked long hours just to make sure that I understood our business so that I could communicate it effectively. So learning never ends.
Nice. I like that. I guess this is maybe a little bit more of a, or are we done? Do I have?
No. We still have some time, but I did want to give Stephanie some time to ask some questions of you, Julie,
Totally,
if she
yeah.
has any.
That's Julie, you're a very good communicator, by the
Thank
way.
you.
So, I would ask you the kind of the same question. What aspect of your college experience are you most proud of?
I would probably say a similar thing, like the relationships that I built. I was involved with the Center for Public Deliberation here, and that was probably one of my most defining college experiences. And I met so many really great people through that, and a lot of people who similarly like a lot of like-minded and a lot of people who aren't like-minded, and learned how to communicate and communicate through difference. So I think those were some of things I'm most proud of.
What are you most excited about moving forward?
Well, partly not having to write like 15-page papers anymore. That's going to be nice to take a little bit of a break from. But I'm just excited to like apply all of these skills that I've been learning. I've kind of been storing them all in my head for the past, 4 or 5 years of college, and now I get to actually really apply them to something. So I'm definitely excited to see kind of how that unfolds.
Mm-hmm. And then did you have any challenges that you had to overcome being a first generation student, or what resources did you use or have? Or
Totally. I think my biggest challenge was kind of in one of the questions that I asked you, which was just like feeling like I don't belong in this environment. And I think something that was so helpful for me is that we have this as a resource in the communication studies department. One of my first classes that I took was with Dr. Williams. And in the first class, she told us that she was a first generation college student. And I think that made all the difference for me, because I was like, this is a person that is my professor, but they have literally been in my position that I'm in right now, which means that I can do this. I can get through this, because there are all these resources in the communication department that show like first generation college students can get it done and they do belong here. So I think that was the one thing that was super helpful for me and my biggest struggle.
Yep. How are you? What are you doing right now to network with people? You mentioned professors, but are you doing anything else, or kind of looking at different resources, or how are you meeting other people?
So right now I'm in my hometown, which is there are actually quite a few young people around here that are old friends or new people who have moved here. So I'm trying to get connected with a lot of those people. Texted a few people that are new in town, and we've kind of formed a little bit of a group text, a bit of a friend group, and I've met a lot of new people through that. And this is maybe a little bit weird of a network thing, but whenever there's a recruiter that's like wanted to do an interview, I've tried to email them back and ask them a couple of questions or tell them a little bit about myself. And I think that's been something that's not only good for like job search, but also good for just meeting people as well, because people like to talk about their companies. And if you ask a question, they'll answer it usually.
Great.
Well, thank you both so much for taking time today to talk with us and to share your stories. I have really enjoyed hearing the path that both of you have taken and what you have found to be helpful along your journey. And I hope that this is just kind of an introduction between the two of you, and that your paths continue to cross, and that you are able to continue to help each other. So we will have another conversation next week, same time, same place, Thursday at 11 o'clock. Our student joining us next week is Megan Robertson, and our alumni is Dean Grease. So I hope we can see some of you then. Julie, Stephanie, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having us. This was lots of fun.
Thank you.
Take care.